One of my favourite lines from Young Frankenstein was when Igor says, "Wait, master, it might be dangerous. You go first." And I know I sound nothing like Igor, but it's time to roll the sleeves up and sketch him anyway. Now, you could be wondering why I'm drawing Igor from Young Frankenstein, and the reason being is that not long ago, Scott Christian Sava came out and said in one of his shorts that he thought acrylic paints were icky. And I mean, that just sent me into orbit. I thought, what, icky, Scott, what? No. I mean, now how dare he say that about my beloved acrylic paints? And to be honest, I don't even know what icky means, but I'm just going to go with it. I mean, look here, for example, they've got a pointy nib on the lid so that they can pierce the aluminium membrane that keeps the paint all fresh and buttery. Now, is that icky? Like I said, I really don't know what icky means, but anyway, here we are mixing up the background. I'm trying to be funny and I know I'm not, but I'm mixing up the background and I'm turning it into a nice turquoise blue by adding a little bit of blue, green and whatever the other colour was. I think it was white there. So, got a little bit in his mouth there, so I've just flicked that out with my finger. I love having a little bit of my own DNA mixed into the painting. And that brings me on to another point. People get so precious with their paintings they feel they can't touch them, spill coffee on them, maybe rub their face all over them. And look, art is subjective, so at the end of the day it is your artwork, you're in control and you are the creator. Here we have Igor wearing a pretty cool looking dark brown hoodie, and all I've done to mix that paint is a little bit of black with a lot of brown, dark brown, and it looks like a little bit of raw sienna dark there that I've mixed in to highlight the creases and folds of the hoodie. Now, acrylics do have a tendency to dry a different colour as to what they were when they're first applied wet to the canvas or paper, so just bear in mind that they may change or alter a little bit. Here I'm mixing up the skin tone or flesh colour for Igor's face with a lot of white, a little bit of raw sienna dark, and it looks like there I've just squeezed a little bit of yellow ochre as well onto the saucer or plate. I've also added some crimson to the mix just to be able to bring out that pinky skin tone, although you can't really tell here for this first coat, and that's another point. When you do start to paint that first initial layer of paint onto your canvas or paper, don't be dismayed because it won't look anything like what you're hoping to achieve. I call this the ugly stage, and don't worry if you don't get that initial mix perfectly right, because you will start to tweak that as we go along. Here I've started to add a lot more pink to the mix, and as you can see it's really brought that skin tone out. Here I'm starting to paint out the white of the eye. Now don't be tempted to just leave it if it's white and that you've got a white background, because that unpainted area will eventually yellow or age over time. So make sure that even though it's white, you do give it a coat of white paint. Here I'll start to speed up the process, but you can see that I'm just starting to add some white to the forehead and just to start to really bring out those shiny parts of the crease lines or folds in his forehead. This part of the painting, I'm really just mapping out parts of the forehead and his face, and I'm not getting carried away with trying to add too much detail. Here I'm adding his big bushy eyebrows for a reference. And you'll see me rework these eyebrows and other parts of the face throughout this whole painting. It's just a matter of adding layer after layer to be able to build up that colour, or to make myself sound like a real artist, I should say, tonal value. Speaking of real artist, I must say that Scott Christian Sava is the real deal. I mean, I have absolutely no beef with him, and I am a subscriber to his channel. It's just that when he said they were icky, he did get me thinking about paints and paint in general. And once I'd seen the job he'd done on his beloved rendition of Igor with gouache, it really motivated me to have a go at trying to get something similar with not only acrylic paints, but I thought I'd up the ante by buying the cheapest, nastiest acrylic paints that I could possibly find. And I think I achieved that, because this pack here that you can see on the screen cost me a princely sum of $4.50. And another great little kind of feature, I guess, that I do like about these easy little blister packs or tubes of paint is the fact that they don't actually have names like raw umber or burnt sienna or quinacridone red. It's pretty much just a tag colour at the top of the tube, and you pretty much make up your mind as to what colour you'd like to use for that particular part of the painting. And I've got to be honest, I'm actually quite surprised at how well they've performed, considering they are such a cheap blister pack of paints, which is actually really encouraging for me, because I want people to be able to have a go at art without breaking the bank and feeling they need 10 years of experience. Now here's a good example of painting and then correcting as I go. I've painted in the darker shade with the brown for the shade of the nose and around the nostril area, and then I've come back over the top of that brown with the flesh tone while it's still wet, allowing me to be able to blend and also soften that darker colour so it's not so harsh. And then finishing off those big bristling eyebrows, which gives him that menacing but let's say mischievous look, now allowing me to focus completely on his big bulging eyeball. As you can see there, I've got a few blues mixed up, and I've gone with a light of blue first. That way I can start to build out to the darker edges. And as you can see to the right of the screen, I've got an array of different brushes, from a fan brush to a flat brush to a filbert, and at the moment for the detail, I'm using a round brush. And these have a really fine tip which comes in handy for all your fine detailed work, and they usually come in a 0 or a 1, which gives you an indication of what size to use. And now I'm switching out to my filbert, which is pretty much just a flat brush with rounded edges. Excellent for painting in pupils and really good for pushing paint to the outer edges of your subject without having any sharp edges like a flat brush, or having to paint for ages with a detailed brush. Changing out to a flat brush so I can cover a bigger area. Now I have sped up the film here a little bit so you don't have to sit through the whole thing, but it's an excellent example of wet into wet, where I'm using the flesh tone to really emphasise his cheeks and all those little nooks and crannies around his nose, and then I'll start to add some white, which really adds to that, let's say, vibrancy to the face. And don't be afraid to add big dollops of white into those parts that you really do want to highlight, because it will dull down once it dries. And you'll probably find yourself wanting to add more once it is completely dry to really bring out that, like I said earlier, vibrancy to the face and those nice highlighted areas. Okay, we're going to start to move into the mouth now. I'm just, as you can see, as I did earlier, just mapping out these parts of the face, and then I'll start to add a little bit of green. And I found that got a little bit too jaundicey, so I added a little bit of blue, or mixed a little bit of blue into the mix, and that started to really give him that 5 o'clock shadow that I was looking for. Raw umber for the shadow under the nose, and then I'll just start to use again my filbert brush to be able to fill in those areas. Back down to my detailed brush, and now, as I said earlier, I've mapped it out with a darker colour, and now I'm really starting to build that colour and bring out those highlights. Back to blending here with a little bit more of that flesh tone, and then I'll really bring out that highlight of the lip there with a little bit of white. Then I'll just start to blend all that together, and now I'm going to cut in a little bit more of that shadow. I've made his chin a little bit more protruding than Scott's, but I've got to say, Scott Christian Sava's rendition of Igor here is not only spot on, but it was just so much fun to paint. Admittedly, this is a little bit more advanced, but as I said earlier, I really wanted to challenge myself as to whether I could get that caricature look of Igor with Scott's rendition, and just to sort of give myself that challenge of being able to bring out that funny looking Popeye look, let's say, that Scott managed to achieve. Now we're going to just start to tear off the tape and getting to the point where we're going to do the last big reveal. Now this was painted on paper, and I was really surprised that it didn't go all crinkly and wobbly like they usually do. We've got the bulging eyeball, the big nose, a little bit of a nose pick there, and now we've got him coming up and going to give you the big stink. I got my eye on you.